This game was truly the most depressing and painful game that I've ever played of chess. I played d4, opponent knight f6, and I went knight c3, looking to get into a JOBAVA London. But when my opponent played his next move, g6, I knew I was going to go for an aggressive gambity attack, where I put my bishop on f4, I play e5, and he falls into my trap. So this is what I just decided to go for. I wasn't going to have to spend too much time this game because I knew all the lines. I play this all the time online. And although my opponent is going to have a lot more time to think through the moves and find a good response, I knew that it was going to be difficult if he messed up this move in the position that you can see on the board right now. 95% of the time, people will take that pawn, and he sat down here and he was having a think, should he take that pawn? And the one move that you really need to find is knight h5. And it's not so obvious because putting the knight on the edge of the board is not a, it's not a move that jumps off the page at you. Obviously, it's quite good here because it's attacking the bishop on f4. And I would either have to retreat the bishop, maybe even all the way back to c1, or defend with my queen on f3, which is generally what I go for. But here, we're already into the opening moves, and my opponent probably knowing that I've blitzed out these first few moves. I don't know. It's always in the opening when something happens that people feel obligated to continue playing quickly. So in this position, my opponent did decide to take the pawn on e5, which meant that the position was totally fine for me. The only issue here, the only mistake I've made is going for this push initially, and it is a gambit. So here he takes the pawn. I recapture immediately, attacking his knight. The queens are looking at each other, so I'm expecting him to trade off queens before he deals with his knight. He doesn't want me to take his queen on e8 or d8, forcing his king to give up castling rights. In his structure, he wants to castle his king and keep safe. So it just makes sense for him to capture my queen, rook takes, and then he can deal with the issue of his knight. Probably knight h5, attacking my bishop. That's the best move. However, here, he does capture my queen, and I take back with rook, and I'm up 50 seconds on the clock. Now, you're probably wondering, why is this the most painful and depressing game I've ever played? I've gotten a really nice opening, and the reason will become apparent at some point in the game. In this position, my opponent has to find the move knight to h5. And knight h5 attacks the bishop, but it's not so obvious for him because as soon as he goes knight h5, I go knight d5, and I'm threatening a fork, one that his king can't protect and his knight can't protect on a6 because it'll be captured by my bishop on f1. And so he's probably realizing how dangerous this opening is. But actually, if he just goes knight h5, he short castles, he's going to be able to win that knight on a8 and the bishop on f4 because he's attacking the bishop with a knight on h5. So he actually is okay here. The engine gives me probably what, a +1.5 in this position because I'm the one attacking, I'm the one making all the decisions. And I could potentially win his rook, but actually in that position, I wouldn't go for his rook on a8. I would actually just take the pawn on e7, and that would be with a check, and then probably take his bishop on c8. And that position is a very interesting one that I know extremely well. So I'm going up on the clock here. Like, my time on the clock is going to be fantastic. I know all the engine lines here. And so you might say, oh, and slow down, but I know all the moves. And you're going to see as this game goes how crushing it is. My opponent doesn't find the move knight h5. He instead brings his knight back to d7, a move that I know well. And so knight jumps in to d5 here, and I am ready to crush him. This position is disgusting for me. It's probably, what, like a +4? And I'm looking at that pawn on c7. Now, how does he defend it? If he goes knight a6, the bishop on f1 captures, he takes back, and I get the fork, and I win his rook. He knows that he can't go into this line. So his only other option is king d8. What else can he do? And so my opponent plays king d8, and I immediately play the move e6, attacking the knight. Now, if he moves the knight, well, I can move my knight with check. So I can go, knight to b6 and win the rook and give him a check with my rook. And so I'm just crushing there. So he has to take the pawn. But the reason I push the pawn forwards is because now I reintroduce the threat of taking on c7. My bishop is looking at that c7 pawn. And so in this position, my opponent's really just forced to take that pawn. You can see my opponent's clock is ticking down. He's spending a long time with these moves, and I'm up to 46 minutes on the clock. I take that pawn on c7, hitting the rook, and what am I going to do? Take that rook in the corner and lose my bishop and have my knight trapped? No, I'm not. And you can see my opponent was stressed here. It's as if he's like, he's being forced to make these moves. But e5 is the most logical response. But he's not ready for what I'm going to do next. I'm not taking that rook in the corner if he plays e5. My opponent's down to 35 minutes. He pushes e5, and I pull the knight back with check. His king only has one move in the position. He's got to go over to the e8 square, and then I take his bishop with check. And so I'm just going up a minor piece here. I don't want to get my knight trapped on a8. My opponent, realizing the predicament he's in, he's forced to e8. I take the bishop, and here the most common move is for the king to move forwards to f7. Now, he could go back to e8, but if he goes back to e8, I check again on, back to d8. I check again on e6, and then, fork again, winning the rook. So he doesn't want that. So here, he attacks my knight, and I just slide the bishop up to h6. I know these moves. I know this line. And my opponent is thinking now, how does he get out of this issue? He goes with one of the most common responses here, knight to f6, and I immediately play knight f3, needing to get more pieces into the game. I'm threatening to take that pawn on e5, and I know this position so well. I've played it. I know the lines. I have a check coming over to c4 with the bishop, and the position's just beautiful. My opponent goes into a deep think here. 11 minutes burning on the clock. And what is he going to come up with? The move he eventually decides upon is pawn to e6. And I wasn't entirely sure here in this position. I knew I could start spending my time, but I had already thought about moves that I wanted to go for. So bishop c4, but also introducing my knight into the attack. So potentially knight g5. And this whole time, you might say, oh, and you're not using the time on your clock. But I was ready for this move, pawn to e6. I had to just double check what I was going for here. And this was the first moment in the game where I wasn't instinctually like reacting immediately, but I'm feeling very confident here in this position. I was really looking at the move, knight g5. I spend about a minute and a half double checking the move, and I go in for knight g5 check. Where's his king going? Either to e7 or f8 or g8. And there's issues with all of those moves. First of all, the move king to g8 loses to rook d8 check, knight e8, and rook takes e8 checkmate. If they go to king f8, well, we just go rook d8 check, king e7, and then rook takes h8. So we're just winning a rook in the corner. That looks bad. But the move king e7 is a wee bit trickier. On king e7, I'm supposed to play the move f3, bishop d7, and then knight goes to e4. I, however, did see that the pawn on e6 was hanging. I already have two attackers. He's got two defenders, so why not just add a third attacker? It can't be a bad move. But yeah, rerouting might have been the way to play. I could have also taken the pawn on e6 immediately, and his bishop's going to take, and then I take back, and then his king takes, And then I come in with check, but I'm giving up material for less material. And yes, I do get a check in. And I suppose the nice thing about that position would be I'm saving my bishop on h6. The reason I really need to play f3, and it was a move I thought about, was that then his knight can't jump to g4, and g4 wins my bishop in the on the side of the board because it's currently stuck by my own pieces. So just taking on e6 probably was the way to go. I'm already up 3 points of material, so it's okay to give a wee bit of material back. But I thought, let's try to come out with more material, play just good chess. Bishop c4 seemed like a decent move here. Now, in this position, my opponent really needs to find the move knight forwards up to g4, hitting my bishop. And, if he goes for that, then he can win the bishop. However, he plays a slightly inaccurate move. It was the second best move according to the engine. He plays knight to g8. Now, the reason it's not so accurate is because I can actually just play knight f5 check and put my bishop on g7, or the move that I played. Both are exactly the same score according to the engine. So I just decided to take the pawn. But yes, I could have gone knight f5, g takes f5, and then bishop g7, winning the rook in the corner. I would have gotten a rook for a knight in that position. But the engine really likes what I decided to do. And so I was pretty happy with this move. I was feeling pretty confident here. Everything is looking fairly simple. I'm just going to be able to trade down some pieces and win an easy game of chess against a much higher rated opponent. I think he was around, like a 1650, 1660, and I was just over 1500. So I was feeling very good here. He decides to swap off some material. He takes my knight. And so here I can simply capture back with my knight or my bishop. I had a little think and decided to capture with knight, centralizing my piece. He captures my bishop back on h6. And I chuck my knight over to c7, winning his rook in the corner. So everything is looking fantastic. I'm up 1 point of material here. And if I capture the rook, I'm going to obviously be up 6, but he'll probably capture the knight back. So I'll just be up 3 points of material with a very easy game to play. He develops his knight to c6, protecting his rook on the corner. And so I just decide to capture that rook and look to centralize all my pieces, maybe short castle, get the rooks on the D and E files, and play some chess. He recaptures on a8. I short castle, getting ready to get my rooks into the game. And I'm just up the exchange here, and also up a pawn, and he has an isolated pawn. Clearly, it could be better from, the position that I did have. Didn't play the middle game absolutely perfectly, but I don't think I've really made too many mistakes yet. He centralized his knight onto f5 here. So I just centralized my rook, wanting to not have any loose pieces. We're just going to win this very simply. I'm still over on the clock from what I actually started at. My opponent asked me for my score sheet. He wasn't entirely sure what moves were made in what order. So he's just going to fix his score sheet and then continue. But his clock's ticking away. He's 15 minutes, and I'm still over 45 here, so I'm feeling very confident. My opponent pulls his knight back to attack my bishop, and I'm just looking here to pull my bishop somewhere safe, and I actually pull it forwards because I thought it looked like an easy way to just take his knight and, swap off more material, or potentially win that pawn on b7. He pulls his knight all the way back to f7. Not entirely sure what his reasoning was behind this move, but I thought, let's just keep simplifying, take that knight off on c6 and give him another isolated pawn. I mean, it just made sense. I was thinking here, just take the knight on c6 and give him another isolated pawn, but then I saw, if I just take on f7, then I can actually check on d7, get my rook to the 7th rank, and win the pawn on b7. So that looked like the way to go. He captures my bishop. I go in with check. And now I'm going to be winning on b7 instead of making just an isolated pawn. He pulls his king up to e6 and I take the pawn. I mean, you couldn't really ask for a better game. I mean, this is just fantastic. Everything about this game is just perfect. It's just lovely. I'm hitting his pawn on h7, so he decides to pull it up to h5. And now I'm wondering, how do I use my other rook. Let's get it onto the open file, get double on the 7, and start winning more pawns. My opponent here knows that he's lost. He plays his rook to b8, which I promptly just take, and he can recapture with his knight on b8. He knows the game's over. I have 6 pawns and he's got 4, and 2 of his are isolated, and I have the rook and he's only got a knight. So, I mean, how difficult could this game be? I pull my rook up to the 3rd rank, ready to slide it over maybe to g3 and try to pick off some more pawns. Honestly, I could win this game in my sleep. He pulls his knight up to c6. I slide my king over to f1. Just wanting to centralize all my pieces. And yeah, simple game. My opponent plays his pawn up to a5. Had a little think here. Just decide to continue centralizing my king. He plays his pawn up to g5. I continue centralizing my king up to e3. And here we go, lads. He attacks my rook. Knight to b4. You love to see it, don't you? He's attacking my pawn on c2. He's also attacking my pawn on a2. So I just defend my pawn on a2 and allow him to fork me. As soon as I made this move, I was like, what have I just done? Absolutely idiotic, absolutely insane. How do I do something so stupid? I was more annoyed with myself here than I think I've ever been in a game of chess. I mean, just how dumb can somebody play? Like, how dumb can I play? I just play so dumb. I mean, it's seriously, there's no other word for it other than dumb. I mean, it's just brain dead. I don't understand how I play like this. I have over 45 minutes and my opponent's down to 8. I just don't know, man. My opponent, knowing that he needs to take away all of my waiting moves, plays the very good move a4. I was going to play it if he didn't, and then I would have had the a2 to a3 move available for myself. And here I just play h3, trying to take away any of his waiting moves. Now he can't play g4 himself, and he can't play h4. Well, he can, but you know, then he's out of waiting moves. And I'm hoping maybe in this position that I'm going to be able to gain opposition. Here he plays the move g4. The position is already a complete draw. I could take on g4, or I can go h4, or I could even move my king. Everything is drawn here. I play h4. He moves his king over to f6, wanting to be ready for anything, and he can always take opposition. You know, if I try to move around his pawn, he can move up, and you know, he's doing totally fine here. I play forwards, playing f3 here, which he takes. For the next 20 minutes, I try to calculate this position and see, is there anything I can do? I'll speed this up a wee bit here because there's absolutely no point in going over it. I actually, after, 20 minutes of calculating on the clock, know that it's drawn. There's absolutely nothing I could do. And my opponent knows it's a draw. It's completely depressed. I mean, I've never been this frustrated with a game of chess. I mean, it was so frustrating. I suppose I did learn something here. And you're not allowed to apparently point at the board while you're calculating. And my opponent told me this. And so I am thankful that he told me this because I didn't know that was a rule. Anyway, back to me talking about how frustrated I was. Yes, I still win points from this, but like, I mean, lads, have you ever seen anything so bad? It's so bad. It's in this position that I finally say I'll take a draw, and he immediately accepts. So dumb. I'm an idiot. It's like such a stupid. I do it all the time. I think you might be. I can show you that opening and everything. It was like completely winning for me. Yeah. He asked what the name of the trap was that I played. I told him it doesn't really have a name. Maybe I should name it. Maybe it should be called Blunderman Gambit or something. I don't know. Come up with some name. But anyway, the engine says we both played with an 84.9% accuracy. But he was never winning. It's just me being an idiot. Ah well. Hope you enjoyed.